Well, not sure I have any news for you as far as the state of Nigerian roads are concerned. We all know the very sorry state of the Nigerian roads across the cities, across townships and villages, and across the country. So it's been a very difficult and very naughty problem for every administration to fix the thousands and thousands and thousands of roads network across the country, one of the worst around the world. So, but the government says it wants to be doing budgetary to make sure that we get better road networks to move people, goods, and services across and save lives at the same time. So there's a new idea from the current finance minister, Adeosun, who says the cabinet has approved a new road trust fund program. It's going to be structured around the corporate, the organized private sector, getting them tax credit if they spend their own money to repair the roads or perhaps construct a new one. That's what is this really in summary. But let's unpack this with Tajuddin Ibrahim from Chapel Hill, Denham. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming. And we all travel the bad roads every day. Yes. So whether you have a driver or you drive yourself, we all know how it feels. So let's just leave that as it were. But again, what's the highlights? And thank you for sending this few pages in regarding this road trust fund. What's your understanding of it?
Well, the key thing is around infrastructure. And it speaks largely to the government, in this case, in my view, trying to think out of the box. Because you cannot tackle the infrastructure problem by using the traditional ways that we all know in this country. So you need to do something extra, go extra miles. So this speaks to the government being able to think about options and then going to the PPP, which is basically public-private sector partnership, which is the key driver of this. It speaks to, number one, an attempt by the government to ensure that the provision of good roads to Nigerians is accelerated. That's the key thing here. Second is they bring in here private investors, private companies that are well organized. And then, so they use their own cash flow to support the country's infrastructure sort of need or requirement. Then the third thing in here is there is some kind of incentive for the companies that participate. So that speaks to tax credit for them. And probably another thing that pops up here is around what is in it for the government. Does it mean that government tax sort of reduces? The answer is no. So, largely speaking, what they plan to do is to ensure that the effort of the government is complemented with, this kind of scheme or this kind of, trust fund. So, not necessarily a case of the government trying to withdraw from spending on roads, but it's just to say that there is a lot of involvement or engagement of the private sector to accelerate, and that is the key thing here. But there are incentives for them to ensure that these companies are encouraged to participate.
Tajuddin, does it sound to you or look to you like a very good idea?
It looks to me like a good one, and it looks to me like the problem of Nigeria in terms of infrastructure could be solved with this kind of approach. So, like at Chapel Hill, Denham, for instance, we have an infrastructure debt fund where we speak to infrastructure projects that are already ongoing. So we invest in that and ensure they are executed. And that brings in, for investors in such a fund for us, some stream of cash flows that ensures that they receive something higher than what they will get on the sovereign bonds. So those are the kind of initiatives that that are coming out from the private sector. And it seems to me like the government has learned from this and then trying to replicate something similar. So that is where I would say it is a good idea for them.
So the Adeosun's Road Trust Fund, how do you think it will work? And we need to, our folks there will push this up on the screen for us. Let's start with the what we already know, the Dangote, flour mills, Apapa, Nigeria Port Authority kind of a relationship, handshake when it comes to this. This is a form of a PPP, well, cum CSR, isn't it?
Okay, so good. So the one that we already know that you talked about is this Dangote, Flour Mills, MPA, kind of partnership. And there are two things I think that are important here to bear in mind. The first is these companies are doing this in form of a CSR, corporate social responsibility. And the second thing to bear in mind is that it looks to me like the government is trying to bring everything together. Instead of each of the companies just deciding on their own that, look, I want to fix this, I want to fix that. So the government said, look, come, guys, let's have a big pot. Let's have a structure in place. Let it be an approved scheme by the government. Then we can run with this, and any interested companies can come on board and participate. So this is where we have, for instance, a case where Dangote, Flour Mills, and MPA already started, to reconstruct the 2-kilometer road, Apapa Road, which is going to cost them about 4.3 billion naira. So this is pre the current scheme that the government is planning.
Pre the Adeosun's Road Trust Fund.
Correct, because this is largely a CSR, driven project.
So that's a standalone. So let's take us to the next page. And this is where you have a lot of explanations to make, and that's the reason why you're here. Because we need to break this down and how this will work, how the Adeosun's plan will have to be in bed.
Yes.
Very well in bed and embedded.
Yes.
With Fashola's Ministry of Power, Works and Housing before we start getting into some level of clashes. So how does it work out? If you look at what the Ministry of Power and Housing will got, what the budget will be for the Ministry of Transportation as well, everybody here will have to be in on this game. And that's what we're looking at on the screen.
So there are three factors to bear in mind here. The first one is around, what are the priority areas, for the government with respect to 2017 budget. If you take a look, you'll find in there that the bulk of the budget is around infrastructure. That donut shows 56%.
Okay, the donuts are at the top right.